Okay, real talk. How many things are you stressed about right now? Your job, your relationship, what someone said about you last week, whether people like your post, whether you're making enough money, whether your body looks right, whether you're living your best life. Here's the question nobody asks. Who decided all of that deserves your energy? We live in a world that is constantly telling you what to care about. Care about your follower count, care about what strangers think, care about keeping up, care about being positive, care about being productive, care about being happy all the time, every day. And here's the brutal result of all that caring. Americans are more anxious, more burned out, and more emotionally exhausted than any generation in history. Not because life is harder, because we are giving our energy to things that do not deserve it. This is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson, one of the best-selling books in American history. And despite the provocative title, this is not a book about being lazy or not caring about anything. It's about something much more important. It's about learning to be very selective, almost ruthlessly selective, about what you give your limited energy to. Because here's the truth Mark Manson wants you to hear. You have a limited number of fucks to give in this life, and right now you are wasting most of them on things that will not matter in 5 years. By the end of this video, that's going to change. And your English, it's getting sharper and more natural the whole time. Real American vocabulary, direct, confident sentences, the kind of English that gets respect. Let's get into it. Manson opens the book with something he calls the feedback loop from hell. Here's how it works. You feel anxious about something. Normal, right? But then you feel anxious about feeling anxious. Then you feel angry at yourself for feeling anxious about feeling anxious. Then you feel guilty about being angry, and now you're in a spiral that started from one small worry and turned into a full mental breakdown. Sound familiar? This is what social media does to people every single day. You see someone's perfect vacation photo and feel bad about your life. Then you feel bad about feeling bad because you should be grateful, right? Then you feel guilty about not being grateful, round and round. Manson says the desire to always feel good is itself the problem, not the anxiety, not the envy, not the sadness, the desperate need to never feel those things. Here's the English lesson in this chapter. Notice how Manson uses short, punchy sentences to make big ideas hit hard? That's a technique. Short sentences create impact. Long sentences explain. Mix them, just like we're doing right now. The moment you accept that negative emotions are a normal part of being alive, they lose most of their power over you. The feedback loop breaks, and suddenly you have room to actually breathe. Here's the idea that flips everything you've been told upside down. Happiness is not something you achieve. It's not a destination. It's not a state you reach and then stay in forever. Happiness is a constant process, and it always involves problems. Manson says, the solution to one problem is simply the creation of a better problem. Think about that. You work hard to get a promotion. You get it. Now you have the problem of more responsibility, longer hours, higher expectations. You find the perfect partner. Now you have the problem of making the relationship work, compromising, growing together. You get fit. Now you have the problem of staying fit, maintaining discipline, not losing what you built. There is no problem-free life. There is only the question of which problems you're willing to have. And this is actually great news, because it means the goal isn't to eliminate problems. The goal is to find problems that are worth solving to you. Problems that feel meaningful, that engage you, that challenge you in ways that feel right. Manson asks, what kind of pain do you want in your life? Not what do you want to enjoy, what are you willing to struggle for? Because the answer to that question tells you more about your values than anything else. The person who wants to be a great musician has to be willing to struggle with years of practice, rejection, and doubt. The person who wants a great relationship has to be willing to struggle with vulnerability, hard conversations, and compromise. The struggle defines the goal, not the other way around. What struggle are you willing to choose? Okay, this one is going to sting a little. You are not special. Now, before you click off, hear Manson out. For the last few decades, American culture has been obsessed with telling everyone they are special, unique, destined for greatness, born to stand out. Every kid gets a trophy. Every kid is told they can be anything. Every kid is told they are the center of the universe. And then those kids grow up and discover that the world does not treat them like they are special. And the crash is devastating. Manson says this is one of the most harmful things we do to young people, because when you believe you are exceptional by default, every ordinary moment feels like failure. A normal job feels like settling. A normal relationship feels like giving up. A normal life feels like wasted potential. But here's the truth. Most of us are average at most things, and that is completely okay. In fact, accepting your averageness in most areas frees you to actually invest in the things that matter to you. You don't have to be the best at everything. You just have to be honest about what you actually value and commit to that with real effort. Mediocrity in the things that don't matter to you is not failure, it's freedom. The most secure, grounded people Manson has ever met are not the ones who believe they are exceptional. They are the ones who are completely comfortable with being ordinary in most things and extraordinary in a few things that deeply matter to them. That's the goal, not to be special, to be real. This chapter contains one of the most important questions in the entire book. What are you willing to suffer for? Not what do you want, not what are your goals. What are you willing to suffer for? Because everything worth having comes with a cost, and the cost is always some form of suffering. Manson tells the story of wanting to be a rock star when he was young. He dreamed about it, fantasized about it, imagined the crowds, the applause, the fame. But when he actually started playing music, he hated practicing, he hated the rejection, he hated the boring hours of repetition. He didn't actually want to be a musician. He wanted the reward without the suffering that earns it. And that's true for most of us. We want to be fit, but we don't want to suffer through workouts. We want a great relationship, but we don't want to suffer through the vulnerability and hard conversations. We want to be wealthy, but we don't want to suffer through the risk and the grind and the failures. Manson says, your values determine your suffering, and your suffering determines your life. If you value shallow things, status, approval, comfort, you will suffer shallow problems, drama, comparison, fear of judgment. If you value deep things, growth, connection, integrity, you will suffer meaningful problems, hard work, vulnerability, failure on the way to something real. You don't get to choose whether you suffer. You only get to choose what for. So choose carefully, because your chosen suffering is your life. Here's the chapter that changes how you see responsibility forever. Manson makes a distinction that most people miss completely: the difference between fault and responsibility. Fault is about what caused something. Responsibility is about who is going to deal with it. They are not the same thing. Here's an example. If you're walking down the street and someone pushes you, that is their fault. But getting up is your responsibility. You didn't choose to fall, but you always choose what happens next. Manson says, we are always choosing, even when we think we have no choice. The person who stays in a job they hate is choosing to stay. They might have very good reasons: money, family, fear. Those reasons are valid, but they are still choosing every single day. And the moment they own that choice, instead of pretending they have no choice, everything shifts, because now they are an active participant in their life, not a victim of it. This is not about blaming yourself for your circumstances. It's about reclaiming your power within them. Victims ask, why is this happening to me? Responsible people ask, what am I going to do about this? Those two questions lead to completely different lives. Which question are you asking? The final big idea in this book is one that Americans desperately need to hear. You need to say no more. Not to everything, but to a lot more than you currently do. Manson says the depth of your commitment to anything is measured by what you are willing to reject. Think about that. If you say yes to everything, every opportunity, every request, every social obligation, you are not committed to anything. You're just busy. And busy is not the same as purposeful. The most successful, fulfilled people Manson studies have one thing in common. They are ruthlessly clear about what they are not going to do. They say no to good opportunities so they can say yes to great ones. They say no to people who drain them so they can be fully present for people who matter. They say no to distractions so they can go deep on the things that actually define them. Here's the paradox. Freedom doesn't come from having more options. Freedom comes from committing deeply to fewer things. The person with 10 shallow relationships has less real connection than the person with 2 deep ones. The person juggling 10 projects has less real impact than the person who gives everything to 1. What do you need to say no to in your life right now? What are you saying yes to out of guilt, habit, or fear that is stealing your energy from the things that actually matter? Start there and watch your life get quieter, cleaner, and a whole lot more yours.
Let's bring this home. The subtle art of not giving a fuck is not about indifference. It's not about being cold or careless or checked out. It's about being intentional. It's about looking at your limited energy, your limited time, your limited attention, and choosing very carefully what earns it. Most things don't. What other people think of you most of the time doesn't deserve it. Keeping up with people whose lives you see on a screen doesn't deserve it. The petty dramas, the small slights, the minor inconveniences, none of it deserves it. But the people you love, the work that gives you meaning, the values you refuse to compromise on, those deserve everything you've got. Give those things everything, and for the rest, practice the subtle art. Subscribe to Luminae Minds for a new book every week. Real ideas, real English, real freedom. Thank you for watching. Now go choose what actually deserves your energy and let everything else go. I'll catch you in the next one.